Yourself, styling and gender affirming fashion panel discussion. I feel like the recording's going to have me saying just the middle of that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with our just a very short little intro presentation. Thank you all for being here. And thank you to the wonderful guests, panelists who have agreed to come and have this conversation with me about gender affirming fashion. In order to give some insight into, I guess, the gender expression experience and the ways you can undergo that, how it's, can be very unique, but what is maybe common amongst different components of it. So with us today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but we've got Rae Hill, Ærin Salvo, and Sheen Hui, who all graciously agreed to have this conversation with me. So without further ado, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Rae, and I'll get the slide to advance as well. There we go.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting. My name's Rae, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm the owner and founder of Origami Customs, and we are a handmade line of gender-affirming fashion here in Montreal. So we have a team of queer and trans people that make these garments. I'm also an educator and a consultant for gender-affirming fashion and all sorts of things in that realm.
Thank you, Rae. Excuse me. Moving on. Ærin, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Ærin Salvo. I use she, her pronouns. I am the services manager over at Login VSI. We are a software company that makes software to do automated EUC testing. I've always just been really interested in fashion and, just sort of expressing myself through clothing. I write, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, Ærin. And then last but not least, Sheen.
Hi, I'm Sheen. I use they, them pronouns. I currently work in climate tech. I'm a brand and marketing consultant for a couple different climate tech startups. And currently I'm based in London, but I've lived sort of all over the place. I'm Singaporean, but before this I was in Boston. And then before all of Boston, I was kind of in China and Taiwan. And in my spare time, I really like super creative stuff. I like drawing. I like watching films, and I also volunteer for a couple of film festivals as well.
And I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm Lowe, in case you don't know me. I use they, them pronouns, and I've been at Workiva for almost 5 years now, and a member of our Rainbow Bird for almost as long. Almost identical. I think it was just like a couple months at the beginning where I wasn't, and then jumped headfirst in. So without further ado, I don't need the slides anymore. I just want to get straight into our discussion. And maybe I'll go in the reverse order of our introductions. And just, I think the first question that I had thinking about the topic before you all volunteered to join this discussion was just how would one even define gender affirming fashion? What's the definition there?
So I guess I'm going to go first.
That's you.
For me personally, gender affirming fashion is, as I think I specified before, I'm agender, I'm non-binary, so I don't really fall neatly in really any gender buckets. So for me, I think gender affirming fashion is more dressing in a way and fashion in a way that really reflects how you feel internally, and really makes you fashion that really makes you feel like you're shining, that you're really confident. That's, I guess, the easiest way to talk about it for me.
Ærin?
Yeah, for me, I think, it's the obvious. It's an outward way to, show the world who you are inside. I think it's also a very strong way to sort of embrace sort of the fun side of, especially if you are trans and you're early in your transition. I think it's things that bring you joy, that, sort of feed your inner child, wearing the things that they never got to wear, as an adult. But I think it's also very important to sort of, again, as a form of armor, of like to demonstrate to the world, who you are, to, very strongly state, I am a woman, right? Or I am a man, or I am neither, right? Like there's all of that can be wrapped up in fashion.
Yeah, you two both said it very, very well. That's a great definition. I agree that it's really about showing people the you that you want to be seen. However, I mostly work with undergarments, which operates a little bit differently than the external, the armor, like you were mentioning. So there's this other element that I'll speak to where gender affirming undergarments themselves can be something when you don't want to be seen in a certain way, or you're not comfortable wearing a certain type of clothing maybe yet, that can be an affirmation that stays, for, excuse my pun, but close to your chest. And it can be really important in those moments where people don't feel as safe to have a way to reflect their inner identity.
Staying with you for a moment, Rae, I think, when we originally talked, we got into this a little bit deeper, especially on the, what your company does in terms of, undergarments and gender affirmation. So it also, is worth asking, why the model that you've chosen, which is to try and lower barriers to access, like gender affirming clothing, and why you've chosen even to go towards giving garments away.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that a little bit briefly on top of selling the garments that I make in retail locations and in a web store. I've developed a community program over the last 8 or so years that works with a network of organizations, healthcare organizations, also universities, all sorts of different places around the world. We're on 5 continents now, to be able to give away gender affirming garments. We give away about 4,000 of these garments a year. And what we're seeing right now is a lot of the medical affirmation strategies that people once had access to are being cut kind of across the board. Like we see that a lot in the States, but here in Canada as well and around the world. So these garments now become more of a primary care when people don't have access to a medical transition. And so for me, that was really important to be able to say the people who want to engage in experimenting with their fashion, buying ethically, all of these things, great. But we also know that gender diverse and trans people also historically have like less access to income, and it's not something that everyone can get. And so we wanted to make sure that people who are also living in a lot of like intersectional oppressions, because we do find that like often the groups that we work with are predominantly in the communities where people are affected by homelessness and things like that. So recognizing that gender diverse and trans people already face a lot of barriers that others don't, to be able to get safe care.
Well, thank you all for your answers. Turning away from sort of the higher level and following sort of the trajectory you've set for us, Rae, towards moving towards, the personal. I wanted to ask you all to, give us some insight into how you've charted your course towards finding clothing that is both personally and socially affirming. And how do you build a wardrobe that feels authentic? And I think I'll start with Ærin, but Rae and Sheen, I'll let you two fight it out for who goes after Ærin.
I think for me, one of the biggest things, and this was, sort of true in all of my transition, was learning to listen and trust my intuition on things again. And also maybe indulging my inner child a little bit. I think in all of this, one of the things that you really have to do is you really have to work on what I call your IDGAF, or I don't give a flip muscle, to really start to build out your wardrobe authentically, because you're going to reach a point, especially early on if you're transitioning, and where you're wearing something that you feel like you love. very much affirms you, you feel great about it. But the minute you put your hand on your doorknob to go outside of the house, you start to have doubts. And it's important to push back on those doubts and say, am I doubting this because I just changed my mind as to what I want to wear? Or am I worried about how I'm going to be received in public? And it really is a muscle that you have to push through, and you have to actually vocally ask yourself, you know, do I want to wear this, right? Why am I feeling this way? And sometimes too, it's accepting that, you know, sometimes you're going to wear something that makes you feel great, but maybe doesn't look amazing on you, but you love it. So you wear it anyway, and you push through, and you just say, you know, I'm not going to be, my wardrobe isn't going to be dictated by what the random person at the grocery store thinks of me, right? And I think that once you really build that muscle up, the authenticity just follows it.
Yeah, that's super well said. I really love that, Ærin, so much. I'll jump in here and speak a little bit about like how I came to be in the world of trans fashion, let's call it. I was one of those people who always thought like, I am such a good ally to trans people. I just support trans people so much. And I wasn't identifying as non-binary when I started this company. And then about halfway through, I thought, oh, wait, I actually want these garments for myself. I actually want to feel some of the affirmation that the people that are buying my products also feel. I was like, interesting how that happens. And I love what you said, Ærin, about experimentation at the beginning. I think trying things on figuratively can be so important when you're trying to figure it out. I really believe that clothing has no gender, you know, like we want to just pick and choose pieces, or at least for me personally, that, you know, can be from the men's or the women's side, whatever, like that binary doesn't mean anything. But finding ways to do that don't break the bank and that are safe and fun. So like, I think we talked about like going to thrift stores and picking things out as a way of allowing yourself to kind of have an easier access point and allow some of that fun and that joy and that spontaneity to come in. And, you know, you try something and it doesn't work and you move on and try something else. And it's just like incremental over time, we start to build this self-identity of what does feel good. And of course, like you said, balancing that with how we want to be seen and the safety aspect and the social affirmation and all of that as well, with like, well, how much do I need to be true to myself in terms of the visibility and the creativity that I want to offer the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with what the both of you have said. I think definitely for me as well, like I don't see clothing necessarily in a very gendered way. There are kind of, to me, just different pieces of the puzzle of the piece that I want to wear, right? And I think early on, so I realized I was non-binary in university, so many years ago at this point. But at the time, I didn't have any real blueprint. And also, I think despite only having realized that I was non-binary and agender at that point in time, there were like hints throughout, because I didn't consider myself to have a personal style at the time. I think the idea of having to wear anything in a stylized way was very uncomfortable, because then people would perceive me and they might perceive me as a gender that I wasn't. So I really had to start from scratch. I really had to just literally try different things. I think a mistake that I made early, and I realized early on, was that a lot of times I conflated what I thought looked good on other people in general with what I thought would look good on me. So I would see like a really nice piece of clothing, be like, wow, that's wonderful on that person. This is just objectively a good piece of clothing. And I would go, well, that means I have to wear it. And it's, you know, I would try that and then go, actually, I hate this on me. It looks great on someone else, maybe not the thing for me. But I think for me, from more of a practical point of view, I like break things down based off like texture or movement or contrast or color or fabric type. And so if I did find something that I really liked or really didn't like, I would try to understand what is it about that thing that I didn't think fit me. And then from there, I managed to build up what I would call a personal style now, of like, oh, I like these certain aspects together. And from that, I can actually put together a piece.
Rae, Ærin, do you have also maybe some more detailed logistical information, like just how you go about navigating, let's say, a thrift store. There we go. Or even, oh gosh, you just said it, Sheen, and I've already forgotten it. Okay, well, we'll just start with the first thing I asked.
Sure. I mean, I can jump in. I'll jump in on I think thrift stores are going to really, especially again, I'm coming at this from the perspective of you're starting out. Thrift stores, any brick and mortar is going to really push you in that sort of id-gath muscle. And if you're not ready for that, what I found is you can take great advantage of the Amazon return policy to find things that affirm you. And there are companies like Stitch Fix where you pay a styling fee and they send you a box of clothing, and if you don't like any of it, you send it back for free, and you're only out that like $20 styling fee, those sorts of things. But there's also something to be said for community, for taking a trip, finding somebody who's further along in their journey and saying, hey, come just be my wing person while we go thrift shopping, right? To make me, not feel so in the spotlight, when you're out shopping for things. Undergarments, when you're shopping as a newly out trans woman, is incredibly nerve-wracking in public. But, to have somebody say, girl, don't worry about those people. They're not looking at you. And there's always something to be said for the little white lies too. If somebody hassles you, why are you buying women's underwear? You're saying, oh, I'm shopping for my sister who's, laid up at home, or, whatever it has to do to get you past that. So I think, there's lots of options for things like that to get you out there and doing it.
Yeah. I want to expand on, well, I have 2 points on this. I want to expand on the idea of looking for particular things in stores that draw your eye, like Sheen, you had mentioned like textures, but also like what colors are you interested in? What fabrics feel good to you? So there's all these things where like you can kind of browse not by like what shape do I want this to fit on my body. There's a whole other thing about like, I want to accentuate certain parts of my body. I want to de-accentuate other parts of my body. I want to have a certain silhouette, and all of that is very real as well. But I think in terms of like what we're talking about, the excitement factor of like, why am I drawn to this? What is it about these garments? And I wanted to mention as well, what you were saying, Ærin, about mentorship. And I think in our community, that can be so important. And a lot of people don't have access to that, but like going into community spaces, often there are like, free clothing events, there are swaps, things like that. And like community centers, like, the programs that I work with is often hosted by some sort of like university or queer center who are giving away products, but also will have like a free closet or something like that. And finding the people who, will be able to go through that with you. And also that you admire, like, what do you love about that person? And you're like, oh, they really found their style. Like, okay, what exactly is it about that outfit that I love so much? So there's this real need for like calling into our community, this kind of like a hand holding and a reciprocity, and this, it feels like being brought into this really wonderful family where we kind of like help each other out because we've all been there. I've been at so many clothing swaps where it's like, okay, all the femmes are getting rid of this stuff and all the masks are getting rid of this stuff, and everyone just like flip flops. And I just think that that's so wonderful.
I did remember my question, and that was like, it's related to, there's 2 lovely skirts in my closet who, as I've become more round, let's say, they have ceased to fit. So they're very much like sort of aspirational garments at the outset of my gender-affirming fashion journey. And Sheen, you talked about, being like, I objectively like that piece of clothing, and now I have to wear it. Like, like, you've given the beginnings of how to overcome that particular phenomenon in terms of noticing what you like about it. But it's then, whatever the circumstance of that particular moment is, maybe you like, oh no, I just have to have it. And then you take it home with you, and then it sits in your closet. And you go, oh, well, at least it was from a thrift store. So if anyone could help me or anyone who feels similarly in our audience with that particular phenomenon. I'd love to hear about it.
I will jump in and say tailoring is your best friend. It's not as expensive as many people think it is. Even going to a dry cleaner to have something tailored can be pretty easy access. It's really amazing what you can do with garments to make them feel more like you and get them to a fit that feels affirming. There are people who really specialize in that. And if you can even find someone who's queer or trans, definitely, like there's people all over who specialize in this. But even if not, maybe being a little bit sneaky about it, like Ærin, like you said, you know, saying it's for someone else or whatever, but there's really incredible things that can be done, even making things bigger, to really like, yeah, make sure that your form feels good, that you feel good in those garments. Very underrated technique.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too. I think this is sort of going to what I've said about, you know, this is where you start to determine if you are unhappy with the garment on a whole, or if you are trying to live up to an expectation of how the garment should look on you. I think we put ourselves in the spotlight way more than anybody else does, right? I think a great example for me was leggings, right? Feeling like I'm too round for these, or I'm too overweight for these, and then taking a moment to look around at the cis people around me and see what they're wearing and how they're wearing it, and going, you know what? If they can wear it and it maybe doesn't fit them perfectly, I can wear it too. What's stopping me is just my own insecurities of saying, oh gosh, everybody's going to be looking at me. And you know what? I've found that like 99% of people in the world are too busy living their own lives to look at you. So there really becomes this, is it truly not fitting me? If it's like you can't even button it, yes, get it tailored, get it fixed. But if it's not fitting because it's not fitting you like it should fit, you know, like I have skirts that don't fit me the way I want them to because I want to have the body of a 20-year-old, you know, college girl. You know, screw it. I'm going to wear that skirt out in public too, because I guarantee there is somebody wearing it better than me, but there's also somebody wearing it worse. And maybe that's a little bit of a crappy thing to say, but it's such the truth. If you look around, like, you know, people have so much more self-confidence in their clothing than sometimes you feel that they should. But that's a good thing to look around and say, I can wear these.
And you know what? Those other people are thinking about how they look in those clothing probably just as much as we are. College girls, yeah, they're not like, oh, the height of confidence. Everyone's got insecurities. We always think it's just us, right?
I think my very small addition to it, absolutely agree with both of you on that, is that also you don't necessarily have to stick to wearing it as a skirt as well. I've seen a lot of people wear skirts as tops. I've seen a lot of people, there's, I think, a specific app or something that's more based around upcycling, where it's more of a sustainability thing, but you get connected to a tailor or someone who kind of works in those fields, who can make suggestions on how to take an existing piece of clothing and change it into something else. So yes, you could get that skirt tailored. If you think, actually, maybe I just don't want to wear this as a skirt, it could be tailored into a shirt. It could be made into shorts if you wanted to, even. Like, I don't think you necessarily have to get rid of it unless you really do hate it that much and you just want to get rid of it. But if it's more about the fit, or maybe you just don't really want to wear it as a skirt, there are other ways around it as well.
That's fantastic.
That's a good point.
So I want to now depart from this particular aspect and just go back to something that I think all of you have touched on in one way or another already, which is just that, you know, yes, it's like you have to get the I don't give a flip kind of vibe out there as you get started. And you have to ask yourself, you know, questions of like, well, essentially what Ærin has already said. But at the same time, I think, Rae, you mentioned there is a factor to balance against, which is like physical or psychological safety. And like maybe that's the topic at its most extreme, but it can also be at the level of just like, how do I remain authentic to myself? How does one remain authentic to themselves? How do you remain authentic to yourself across different social contexts, across work, across casual, sport, formal? I guess, Rae, I think I'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I guess in that case, like what I come back to, and obviously my mind is in this place, is like what's underneath of the clothes. I think that that really can have a big impact on the way that the clothes fit and how you feel in certain contexts. For example, like if you need more compressive garments, if you are playing sports, if you are wearing something that's a little bit more form-fitting, which might be formal for some people, if you're going to work and you've got like, you know, a very tight skirt, those things then become really important in terms of how you feel in the outer garments. So making sure that like you have, if you're doing a compressive garment, like a binder or a gaff, you have something that's working with you and not against you for that context. And maybe that means like feeling like you can relax and have no compressive garments, or have something that's a little bit more free flowing on certain days or in certain spaces where you feel more safe, where you feel more confident. But having different like tools in your toolkit is what I always tell people, to make sure that you have something for days when your dysphoria is more, or you're going into a more formal context.
I can go next.
Okay.
Yep. But I think absolutely context is key in the situation, right? Like I think the first thing is making sure that you're, whatever you wear, you're in, whether that situation is safe or not for you to fully express yourself. Because there are going to be situations and places where maybe you aren't going to be able to fully express yourself for whatever reason. But my kind of take with it is, if it is a place in which you feel either that it is safe, or you don't know whether it's safe or unsafe, that there are always ways to kind of very subtly poke at the bear and push the envelope a little bit and play with things that maybe might make you feel a little more affirmed, even if you aren't able to really fully dress how you want, right? Like I think people think when we talk about fashion, we think about clothes a lot, but there's also a lot of power in accessories, in you know, subtle things like that that allow you to kind of test the waters a little bit. You know, maybe one day you come in, you have, I don't know, maybe you're wearing more rings than usual, and these rings, maybe they run more femme or mask or whatever, and you can kind of see, do people care about this? Like, how do people react to stuff like that? And then I think that way it's helpful to, you know, even if you're in a situation where maybe you can't dress fully how you want, to be able to have something still that makes you feel a little better.
Yeah, I tend to think of it as a volume knob, right? Like in any environment that I am dressing as myself. It's just how loudly am I broadcasting? You know, Sheen brought up a good point about jewelry, right? Like I have a necklace that has a little engraved message that says, be kind, ... And then you lift it up and it says, of a bitch, right? And so I can safely wear that in any environment. And I'm always expressing myself, you know, in some way or shape or form. But it is all about a volume knob. Like, you know, I'm not gonna wear the t-shirt that I wear to Pride that says disobedient cunt into the office, but I might wear something, you know, I have a very beautiful bustier that I will wear under work attire. That is very, you know, it's a little bit kink coated, and then I can take that, I can wear that with a white button down, be completely buttoned up and fine. And then I go out in the evening to a more queer space, or to a less formal space. And you know what? I can start to unbutton that shirt and start to show off that lingerie more. It really comes down to, like, you know, I think the question isn't, is this appropriate or is this not appropriate? I think it's a very good question to ask, is how loudly can I proclaim myself and my identity to the world where I'm going to be.
Yeah, I wanted to
I-
make another note as well. Sorry, quickly.
please.
About kind of taking the jewelry thing a little bit farther. And one of the ways I think that we identify safe people out in the world is the subtle way of flagging. So Ærin, your necklace is such a good example of that, but are there other little ways that we can feel that bit of self-confidence and also signal to the world, like, hey, if you know what you're looking for, like you can see me as a safe person, I see you as a safe person. Maybe that's like socks with something weird on it, or like a little rainbow pin, or like, you know, anything else in your jewelry that like flags the certain colors or prints or words or whatever resonate with you, right? And that's kind of how we find each other. And it's a really important part of queer community. I think that's a really great way of both expressing and keeping us safe.
And you can find that in all sorts of unexpected places. One of my favorite shirts that I wore before I was fully out, I got from the men's department at my local Target before Target became persona non grata. And it is a Jack Nicholson golf shirt with flamingos on it. And it is blue, pink, and white. It is like wearing a trans flag. And there is no other way that any trans person would not see that. And even though it's a men's shirt, and I was wearing it as a men's shirt to mask myself, very clearly, you know, if another trans person saw me, they were like, yes.
Yeah, 100%.
See that person over there.
I see you.
Yeah. And so color is, I mean, the flags, you know, are the colors they are because those are very unique and recognizable color combinations, right?
Yeah.
So always thinking that. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
So I see we've got a couple questions from the audience. I would love to encourage more folks to ask questions. I will, want to address these questions to our panelists. I'm going to let maybe one or two more pile up and go to my next question, and then after that, go to the questions from the audience. And that is, you've all given a lot of helpful advice in terms of how to approach this topic. And so before we get to the questions from the audience, I do want to just hear from you what's like maybe your top tip for anyone, you know, working to express themselves through fashion, whether, you know, it's a binary gender, a non-binary gender, what have you. Let's see. I think, you know, I'll let you all decide. You got this.
I can jump in on that one. This is a bit of a nebulous one. The first thing that comes to mind is like knowing what let's say good and bad feels like in your body. So like, how do I know that I feel affirmed? And how do I know when something isn't right for me? Like besides all the social stuff, like just when I'm at home, when I'm trying things on, does it have a certain feeling in my body? Do I say certain things about myself? I think that there's this like kind of somatic layer where like we kind of get used to like checking in with those feelings all the time subtly to help us navigate, okay, I need to go more towards this or farther away from it. And kind of like just developing that muscle is really, really important at the beginning.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. That's exactly, you know, that nails it for me. And I think the other thing that I would add is just really starting to look around, not just in stores or online, but look at people you're around out in public, and, you know, look at their styles and look at, you know, see what resonates with you. You know, if you see somebody wearing a certain pairs of shoes and you feel, whether you act on the feeling or not, you feel compelled to compliment their shoes, right? Remember that. Remember what they're wearing, because whatever it was that they're wearing resonated with you on some level. Even if it was just you think that it looks really nice on them, there's something there, whether it was the color or the texture or the fabric or whatever it was, there was something that made your body automatically want to be like, hey, those look awesome. I love those so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and tagging on to that too, I mean, expanding it to kind of just maybe looking at fashion as a whole. Like, I don't think you need to be an expert or to even know like the terms to look at fashion, right? Like I'm someone who has opinions on like the Met Gala and I like to watch runway shows. Do I know the fashion terms and how to make clothes? Not really. But I think like even looking at stuff that is like that, alternative styles of fashion, I think that just opening your mind to how other people dress and different ways of dressing might stir something in you, right? Of realizing, oh, actually I could wear something like this, and that was never an option for me. I definitely resonate with that. My actual tip was also that to remember that personal style is not a static thing. Like that can absolutely evolve over time. How you want, I mean, how I wanted to dress 5 years ago is not how I want to dress now. Sometimes I look at how I dressed in college and was like, what are you wearing? But at the time, that was what worked for me. And as time went by, that has changed. And so, you know, I don't think there's a perfect way to dress. There's no right way to do it. I think there's just the way that makes you feel affirmed and feel good and safe and seen at that moment. And if that changes, there's nothing wrong with that as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just clothes. You can take them off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a question from Nicole, which is in particular around children. Whether this group of panelists here has any advice for shopping for kids, especially because it's in Nicole's experience, it would seem it's particularly gendered, very often black and white, to use Nicole's words, this or that, one extreme or the other, so little in between or mixed.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think you're right. It on the surface level is very, very black and white and very, very gendered. I think though, if you dig in deeper, you will find that there are pieces that cross gender lines, especially for kids. I think it depends on the ages too. You know, and I think that you also have to sort of look at, you know, again, the psychological and the physical safety of, you know, the kid. You know, a trans girl, you know, might be very much afraid to go to school in a skirt. But you might be able to find a pair of girls' jeans that unless you are tuned into cut and stuff like that nobody's going to clock our girls' jeans. But also, you know, looking at color palettes that they find affirming and those sorts of things, instead of just, you know, making it as binary as it is. And I think that there's also something to be said. Rae made a really good point about undergarments are some of the most affirming things that you wear, right? Like that was the minute my egg cracked and I knew that I was trans, I changed every undergarment that I owned. It was like immediate. And nobody knew but me. And of course, you know, depending on what the kid's school situation is, you know, you have to keep that in mind too. But I think it's just a matter of sort of digging through and also letting the kid guide you. If your child feels comfortable, is a trans girl, and they feel comfortable going to school in a skirt, you know, sort of stop for a moment and say, how much of your own anxieties as a parent are you putting on that kid? Because if they feel comfortable going to school in a skirt, there's something that says to them that this is a safe place for me to do it.
Yeah, I'll build on that. I think this one is particularly context dependent because there is a lot to say about where you are and how people view gender norms and roles where you are. But at the same time, kids don't have that sense of a gender binary that we do. I mean, somewhere along the way, they're going to develop that before they're a teen for sure. But like you said, how much of what you're seeing as binary clothing is actually your interpretation of a binary? Because for kids, like there's no color that's a girl's color and a boy's color until you tell them that, you know, like a boy might wear a skirt to school just because he likes skirts and he might not be trans, or a trans person might just want to wear jeans. Like there's a lot more fluidity for kids. And I think it all depends on like, they're going to go on what you tell them. You know, if you are saying, oh, I don't want you to wear that to school because it's boys' clothes and you're a girl, that's what they'll learn. right? And that there's also something to be said about like, yeah, what they're learning at school and what they're learning in the greater context. But I think just like allowing kids to have a type of fluidity and freedom that we're not always afforded as adults with more like structured spaces is kind of like one of the best gifts that you can give your kids. So like, just let them shop everywhere. You know, it doesn't really matter, especially until they get older.
Well,
Yeah,
speaking of, oh, sorry, Sheen. Go ahead.
Oh,
I was jumping the
very
gun.
small addition. Just because I think what I would say has already been said, but I also think in terms of actually going into a store and shopping, right? I think being able to hopefully turn off the gender in your eyes and just going, okay, instead of maybe going to the boys section and the girls section, it's like I'm just shopping in the store. So let's look for clothing that fits my child. Let's look for clothing that is of, especially because I'm neurodivergent, I'm like, that is of a texture that is nice to your child. You don't really want to wear anything awful for them. And like, you know, are there any interests that my child has? Like I used to like to wear graphic tees a lot. So it's like, oh my God, I love Transformers. Like this Transformers shirt will be perfect, you know? But I think, yeah, like maybe shopping it in that way of going, okay, I just need trousers for my child. What cut of trousers is going to fit and would make them feel happy? We'll just kind of shop for that rather than necessarily, you know, thinking of it from more of a gender point of view.
Yeah, just what are they gravitating towards, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the next question is kind of like, what if they're gravitating away more than towards? So Peter's working with a teen here.
Yeah.
And she just does not want to go shopping for clothes. And Peter's looking to get her interested in going shopping. But it kind of brings to mind something also that I was thinking as we were talking about styling across contexts and safety of like my experience is like in the spaces where I'm known, I can show up more easily as myself, but I have to get between them. And like shopping is a sort of between kind of space, like in a store full of strangers. How do you? And so, for Peter's daughter, she maybe is not worried about the strangers, but she's worried about dysphoria, and doesn't want to go into, doesn't want to spend time on clothing. And I think Peter's looking for a recommendation there.
I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I think that shopping online can be a really good tactic for this if the dysphoria is coming from kind of being perceived, or if not online, making sure that we're going into stores that feel good. Is it like a queer coded store? Are there other queer people or gender diverse people around? Is it in an area of town that feels more safe? So that like there's little kind of things that you can do to make that experience feel a little bit more affirming broadly and situationally. And then the other thing that I would say, I'm going to make like some assumptions about this. Maybe that your daughter here would want to make sure that she feels good in the clothing based on also making sure that she has the undergarments that feel good for her. So maybe this is a person who would want to wear a binder. Maybe she has access to that. Maybe she doesn't. But like the way that clothes fit is going to be radically different, whether or not they feel affirmed in their undergarments first. And I think on the other side of things, for people who are more trans feminine, wearing things with or without a gaff is going to be radically different in the way that you see yourself. So I would definitely make sure that that's not one of the things that's going on here is like, oh, I don't like how this shirt hangs on me. I don't like how I look in it. So maybe just like asking her and making sure that like how she's trying them on in store is in the way that is going to feel affirming.
And for the record, my daughter is trans femme.
Okay.
So like she began her transition like 7 years ago.
Okay. I've got this backwards.
So, yeah. So just, for the record.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for that correction. Then all of the things, but the other way around. So looking at gas, looking at things like that. Yeah, breast forms, perchance, like if that's whatever that thing is for her.
Sheen? Oh, sorry, Ærin.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll let Sheen answer next.
Yeah, because I also touched upon it a bit earlier when talking about myself, where like I had just avoided having any sense of style for such a long time as a teenager. until I had my gender revelation, because I just was really afraid, right? Like I was so afraid of just the idea of being perceived, because for me at least, being perceived meant there could be judgment. It meant there could be people who looked at me and assumed something, and it didn't align with who I actually was. And that really was the root of it. And so for the longest time, I either wore what my parents bought me, or I just wore like really big baggy graphic tees and like all black, not in like a cool goth way, but just in like I didn't want to wear anything. I didn't want to be noticed. And so again, I would have to make a couple assumptions on why your daughter seems to have a lot of anxiety, and a lot of that dysphoria around the act of clothes shopping itself. But I think starting with some sort of ability to give her that feeling of safety, that, you know, no matter what she wears, it could be that it's the risk of wearing something and then looking at yourself and going, that's not what I see, right? So what are other ways to make her still feel like she's seeing herself or who she wants to be, even if that piece of clothing maybe is not the right thing? Like Rae said, maybe it's the people around, or maybe it's, you know, having undergarments, or maybe her hair is styled in a way that is very affirming to her, or having accessories, or some other thing where, you know, even if maybe the clothes themselves may not fit the way that she likes, and there's a lot of anxiety of that, there are other things that she can look at and go, but that's still me. My nails are still painted. My earrings are still really cute. I don't know, something like that, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, what if when you take her out shopping, be like, okay, we're gonna go get your nails done first, and then we'll go pick out clothes.
Yeah.
And so I have a 17-year-old daughter, and, you know, cis daughter, and I will say too, it is a different dynamic when you're doing shopping with your daughter as a male presenting person, than it is, you know, my daughter would have never gone clothes shopping with me pre-transition, right? I transitioned when she was 15, and, you know, there's a little bit of like, you know, how much of is it where we as parents have to sort of change our relationship with them, right? I would not feel comfortable being in my underwear in front of men that I would have gone shopping with before, right? I would not be comfortable looking at undergarments with, you know, my dad now. And whereas as a kid, I would have had no problem. Dad took me clothes shopping because of course he did. Those sorts of things. So I think it really comes down to kind of checking in on that psychological safety and figuring out and sort of getting from her, like, what is it, you know, how do we change this? And maybe it's more of along the lines of, like was said earlier, about like going shopping with a mentor, with a community member, instead of with a parent or a family member or something like that would change it. But I think for that, I think it's less about the fashion necessarily, and, you know, figuring out, you know, what makes her comfortable actually doing the shopping, you know, and sort of checking in with ourselves as parents to figure out where we're not supporting that. Because as loving as we can be, sometimes what we interpret as being loving is not promoting that psychological safety. And, you know, we sort of work against our own interests in the end.
Those are all such insightful answers to this question. Thank you all so much. Would anyone else like to throw a question in the chat, or come off mute or on camera and ask a question to our panelists? Katrina asks for advice related to what you mentioned, Ærin, about you know, adjusting your volume. So advice around the don't worry about what others think, and sometimes you need to dress for someone else, like a wedding, which came up in our pre-discussion, because I have a wedding coming up that I'm going, oh God. So
yeah, and I think it's, you know, again, it's not that you need to wear a dress to a wedding if you're born female, right? But there is, I think, that level of formality that sometimes it's like, okay, well, you are in a group picture with 10 other kids from your club, and they are all dressed for the occasion and you've come out in a t-shirt and jeans because that's what you feel comfortable in.
Yeah.
But it does impact other people. So I'm just trying to be supportive, but also trying to prepare them for the realistic part of the world that, yeah, like you said, sometimes you have to dress in professional attire for something, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'll address the sort of like, how do you support, don't worry about what others think. I think that, for one thing, learning to do that is very difficult. It is like training for a marathon, right? It is not something that you just do immediately. It took me several false starts and then literally standing in my living room talking to myself like a crazy person and actually asking out loud, why do you want to change your clothes, right? Before I started to be able to push past that. As far as like the balance there that you're sort of talking about, I personally think that there is something to be said for asking, is what they're wanting to wear truly inappropriate, or is it just socially uncomfortable if they show up in jeans and a t-shirt? I have a friend who is a VP over at Capital One. He wears a black polo shirt and jeans everywhere he goes. And his philosophy is, if you want me at your event, this is what I'm wearing. If you don't want me at your event, if you want me to wear something else, I'm not coming to your event. And sure, family wedding is something you have to strike a balance on, but I think there has to be a little bit of like, do you want pictures with this person wearing something that is authentically them, or do you want them playing a role? And that's what has to be asked. And then, it sounds like you're sort of talking about maybe a child. We are their barriers as parents. We are the ones who step in and say, you know what, if, Uncle Tim doesn't like what you're wearing at the wedding, too bad, send him my way. I'm not going to make somebody wear what they expect you to wear and make you uncomfortable just because this is the tradition, right? As long as they're not wearing something, why can't a woman wear, or a femme presenting person wear a pantsuit to a wedding, right? Matching the level of formality, not necessarily matching, the gendered expectation.
Ærin, you also said something before when we were speaking that I really liked, which is that like you can still do, if you do have to go stealth, let's say like you really, this is a context where like you really, really need to dress in your assigned gender. There's ways of doing it that can feel more like yourself, like playing with color, playing with texture. Like I think brocade was mentioned. There's ways of making a little bit more your own if you have to. And these kind of, like we were saying before, these subtle ways of flagging, like the jewelry, the hair, the nails, like what are little things that we can do to still feel affirmed when we do decide to step into those contexts as what people are expecting of us.
And if you are somebody who is AMAB and you have to dress in a male way, there is nothing wrong with wearing women's slacks or wearing a women's suit. That 99% of people are going to look at you and they might cock their head a little bit, but go, oh, it's a suit. I don't know why this is hitting weird, but it is. And 9 times out of 10, like what I found for me, when I switched over to women's clothing, it fit me better. Just physically, the fit was better in off-the-shelf women's clothes than it ever was. So it may be that, oh yeah, this is just a really well-fitting suit for me. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I also think it's good to ask, if you are your child or someone is in a situation like that and they want to wear whatever they want to wear that maybe might be even drastically different than what was asked of them, and understanding why. Is it, I just don't like wearing formal attire because it's really uncomfortable for me. And I that's just not how I want to. I can't sit like that for 5 hours in a row. Like I'm gonna explode and die if I have to wear that. Or are there other reasons like this is I just don't feel like I'm expressing myself. Like, and I think tackling it from that point of view as well. You know, if for like, you know, if you have to go stealth, or if let's say it's a very formal event and you really shouldn't be showing up in a t-shirt and jeans for whatever reason, right? Like, what if you can understand what the core reason is why they still want to show up like that? Maybe there are ways to adjust. Maybe we wear less restrictive clothing if it's how tight it is, or maybe it's too hot, you know, maybe different types of fabric. I don't know. But I think there definitely are ways to accommodate for what the person wants without maybe necessarily also, you know, putting the middle finger up to whoever or whatever event you're going to.
All right, folks, we've hit our wall in terms of the time limit. Some of us are likely, you know, need to go back to work in a couple minutes here. But it's been a pleasure having the discussion with all of you. I think it turned out even better than I imagined. And thank you for everyone who joined. And if you wouldn't mind, if we just did a little group photo together. I don't know what happened to Ærin all of a sudden. But
I had a technical glitch. I clicked on the wrong button.
There you are.
There you are. Welcome back. And so if we could just do a photo together, and anyone who would like to appear in the photo, please come on camera. Michaela, could you engineer the photo for us?
Yes, and I certainly will. And Ærin, I have you pinned on my screen, so I can see you clearly in my photo. Unfortunately, with the technical glitch, you might not be pinned for everyone right now. Yeah, but if you want to participate, feel free to come off camera and we'll get a quick screen grab with everybody. Really appreciate this conversation today. All right.
Thank you, everyone, once again for joining us today. Thank you most of all to our panelists, Rae, Sheen, and Ærin. If you're, you know, continuing with your workday, have a great rest of your day. If you're like me and getting ready to sail off into your evening, have a great evening. And see you at the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This is really lovely.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Awesome. I'd love to get one more if panelists would stay. Oh, did we lose Ærin?
Oh, you might have lost Ærin.
Dang it. Okay, well, on the next one. Thank you again so much for everything today and the conversation. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for making space for this. I really appreciate it. It's great to be able to have these conversations.
Oh yeah, it was really fun.
I agree. All right. Well, we will make sure the recording gets shared out. Don't hesitate to reach back out if you have additional questions. I'll share this picture. I wish I could have gotten another one. But we have one at the very least.
Yeah. If the recording is something that you would be comfortable sharing to us, let us know. I don't know if the recording will have the other people in it, or we can crop it or something. It would be nice to do that, but if not, don't worry about it.
Yeah, so Google Meets, when you record, actually what it does is it only highlights the individual talking versus the whole screen. So you'll see that